Welcome back, everybody. Andrew Haggerty, Kent Bush. We're going to be going over some more things today. Now, I know we say this every week, but guys, we're really diving deep into these contracts. I know it looks like we're stretching it out, but we're stretching it out for a reason. There's just a lot to go over, a lot to process, and we're trying to make sure you get a good understanding of what you're looking at and why it's important to understand so you can explain to your clients.
And Andrew, if I can say something real quick right there, guys. If not, while you're watching it, pause the thing. Go get you a copy of the contract. Go get you a highlighter. Make some notes. This is the most important kind of information that we have that we're ever going to give to any of our clients. Let's make sure we understand it.
Absolutely. So with that being said, we're going to dive right into paragraph 7 today, property condition. I'm going to switch my screen over so you guys can see it. So Kent, you will have to let me know if you can see it. So I can figure out. I have too many scenes open.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so what we're going to be doing is property condition. We've already talked about, what you can do, what you can't do, going in there, doing repairs and things. Now we're going to be talking about the actual property condition itself. Seller shall permit buyer and buyer's agent access to the property at reasonable times. And I almost feel like we went over this already, Kent.
We probably went over some of it, but this is one that would probably. Instead of jump on over to paragraph 8 and 9, that's fine.
Yeah, I think I'm almost positive we went over all this stuff. I've slept since last week, and I apologize. I need to do a better job tomorrow.
But why don't you go back and do just a real
We'll do a recap. Absolutely. Because, guys, paragraph 7 is definitely one of those that you're going to see just more and more things. Paragraph 7 is going over and talking about the things that is extremely important. Seller shall permit buyer and buyer's agent access to the property at reasonable times. Buyer may have the property inspected by inspectors selected by buyer and licensed by TREC or otherwise permitted by law to make inspections. Any hydrostatic testing must be separately authorized by seller in writing, and seller at seller's expense shall immediately cause existing utilities to be turned on and shall keep the utilities on during the time of this contract is in effect. There's a ton here, guys, and I'm kind of glad because I think we went over it already that we're going over it again because there's actually a conversation at my meeting yesterday or 2 days ago, weeks going by so quickly, about what happens if the inspector damages something during the inspection. Is the buyer's agent or buyer liable? And the nice thing here, guys, is the seller has given permission through this contract to allow the inspector into the home. This is where you're CYAing yourself, is you need to make sure that that inspector is a licensed inspector by the Texas Real Estate Commission. Exactly. By doing that, they are professional. They have their own board. They have their own insurances that are required, and they're the ones that they're going to go after, saying they didn't do their job correctly. So they can't come at you because they have permission to be there and they are licensed to be there. Yeah, huge advantage. This is where you don't hire your friend or your uncle or your brother to go out there and do an inspection, start messing with someone's house. They have to be a licensed member of TREC. Yeah. The other big one there.
Hey, the red flags on that, Andrew, is when if you're the listing agent and they call and say, "Hey, can you go open a house for the inspector?"
Right.
You say, "Well, does the inspector not have the ability to open houses for themselves?" Well, it's my brother-in-law. He's a contractor.
Right. Now.
Yeah. And then the answer is easy. It's like, yeah, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because remember, guys, you're allowing someone access to someone else's home, and they start fiddling with stuff and cause a fire or leave something on. We were talking about a builder actually turned a stove on for a walkthrough, forgot about it, and it actually burned down a part of the kitchen the day of closing. Now, luckily, it was the builder that did it, so they had to buy them a new home. But stuff can go wrong very easily and very quickly when we're dealing with water and electrical and all those type of things. So making sure that you're hiring a professional is extremely, extremely important. The other thing in there that's huge, guys, that I get fights with continuously daily is seller at seller's expense shall keep utilities on at all times at their own expense till date of closing. They have to be on for inspections. They have to be on for appraisals. They have to be on, period. Now, having the water turned off at the street, especially in winter, strongly recommend, but they have to be on at all times. Seller's disclosure notice pursuant to subsection 5.008 of the Texas Property Code. Buyers receive the notice. Buyers not receive the notice within blank days after the effective date of this contract. Seller shall deliver the notice to the buyer. If the buyer does not receive the notice, buyer may terminate this contract at any time prior to closing, and earnest money will be refunded to buyer. If seller delivers the notice, buyer may terminate this contract for any reason within 7 days after buyers receive the notice or prior to closing, whichever first occurs. Earnest money will be refunded to buyer. Guys, this is another free option period you're giving the buyer if you do not deliver the notice immediately upon having the contract. And the negotiations back and forth, get that notice sent over to the buyer and change on there, buyer has not received to buyer has received, because it cuts away that free 7-day option period that you're giving your client. So extremely important to do to make sure on that end. Number three, seller's disclosure is not required. That is only if it meets certain requirements and criteria, mainly of which is it is in jurisdiction of a court. It is being sold. One of the parties is a government entity. Both the sellers are selling to themselves, things of that nature. But most of the time, a seller's disclosure is going to be required, and you have to have that filled out. Now, the nice thing is, and I know we did talk about this because you told me that you have one in Dallas separately. So we are definitely doing a recap today. The Texas Real Estate Commission, the Texas Association of Realtors, each have a seller's disclosure. So give your client both and say, pick one to choose. If you're in Dallas, correct me if I'm wrong, Kent, you'll have a third one that is an option as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's three. There's TREC, there's TAR, and then there is also the association.
Now, the Texas Real Estate Commission's disclosure basically mimics the minimum requirements of disclosure from the state. So it's probably the most bare bones of all of them. Pick which one, have your client pick which one they want to use. And that's my recommendation there is give them all to your client, let them choose. Seller's disclosure of lead-based paint. Any home prior to 1978 required to have lead-based paint no matter what. The disclosure has to be there. If you represent the buyer, you have to also disclose the pamphlet, how to protect yourself from lead-based paint. And we've talked about this, as close as we are to the border, lead-based paint still does get across occasionally from Mexico. But any home built prior to 1978, that date better be seared into your brain when you're picking up a listing or when you're doing a showing, writing an offer to make sure what date was put there and do I need to deliver this disclosure. And remember, guys, this is another thing that trips people up a lot. The seller has to sign the notice before the buyer. A lot of times what we see is the buyer will fill out the form and send it with the contract.
Yeah.
But the buyer can't sign before the seller, because the buyer can't say I've accepted the notice from the seller before the seller has given notice. Right. And we see this a lot where we have to go back and be like, no, you have to sign ours because we have to sign first. Acceptance of property condition as is means the present condition of the property with any and all defects and without warrant except for the warranties of title and warranties in this contract. Buyer's agreement to accept the property as is under paragraph 7D1 or 2 does not preclude buyer from inspecting the property under paragraph 7A from negotiating repairs. You have to check one box. Buyer accepts property as is, or buyer accepts property as is, provided seller's expense shall complete the following specific repairs and treatments. It has to be specific. And this is, guys, is where I see agents get in trouble all the time. I'm glad we're going over this a second time just to hammer down to you guys. I'm making sure you understand. You can't put in things like lender required repairs, any items as shown on inspection report. It has to be fix the broken window on the bottom floor. It has to be, replace dishwasher. It has to be extremely, extremely, extremely specific items.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Lender required repairs and treatments, unless otherwise agreed in writing. Neither party is obligated to pay for lender required repairs, which includes treatment for wood destroying insects. If the parties do not agree to pay for lender required repairs or treatments, this contract will terminate and earnest money will be refunded to buyer. If the cost of lender required repairs and treatments exceeds 5% of the sales price, buyer may terminate this contract and earnest money will be refunded to buyer. Guys, lender required repairs isn't this magical guarantee that you get all your stuff fixed. It's a required repair. It has to be done. But the contract is very clear that no one is responsible for fixing these repairs. If we can't come to an agreement, the deal's going to die. But you can't come and use it. Well, it's underrequired. You have to do it. I don't have to do anything.
Right.
But if it doesn't get done, you get to cancel the contract and get your earnest money back. So we need to understand that if we can't agree who pays for it, the deal's going to die.
We need to have that conversation with our buyer too. I mean, that's a very specific conversation in the beginning when you start going into contracts, because that's going to pop up in the middle of the deal. And if you haven't ever had that conversation with them, they're just going to look at you like, a cow looking at a new gate or something. They don't know what you're talking about, right? So be sure that that's one of the things on your checklist as you're having needs determination, or you're talking to your buyers about. That's one of the things that you need to have a conversation with them about, because that's going to happen more times than not, especially if you're in the FHA or VA loan.
No, absolutely. And guys, this is really going to be market specific for when this comes into play and how it's going to come into play. In a buyer's market, the buyer's going to give a lot of leeway and be able to get some stuff done. In a seller's market, the buyers are going to have to either figure out how to get it fixed and then pay it at closing, or do different things to make sure. Because the problem with repairs is I really don't like sellers doing repairs of the property for a very specific reason. Sellers don't care anymore. Your definition of fixed and my definition of fixed could be very drastically different things. And since I'm not living in it anymore, my care of it looking good or being done very well is very low. So, what I like to do when I represent a seller is say, listen, you go out, get estimates. Let me know what your guy's going to charge. I'll get estimates. If your guy's close, I'll pay your guy to do the work. And that way, if anything comes up later, you can't get mad at me because it was your guy who did the repairs. Yeah. Thoughts on that, Kent?
Yeah. So if the repairs are required by the inspection report, as I'm representing the seller, I'm going to ask to do in lieu of repairs. I'm going to give you money in lieu of repairs. That way, it's your deal. You got it. I can show where I gave you money to do it. And that way the liability is 100% on the buyer, and they can do what they want and have a good time with it, right? If it goes back to lenders required repairs, one of the things I want to make sure as a buyer's agent is that I have vendors out there that will take payment at closing. So, because we got to get them done prior to that. And a lot of times our guys, we don't want to spend any money prior to closing, right? So I want to have somebody in there that will come in and do a few $1,000s worth of repairs and take an escrow check from the title company, at the time of closing. So, but you gotta have those vendors in place. That's part of your responsibility as a professional, to have people that you can put in place that and you can trust.
Absolutely. From there, we've got completion of repairs and treatments. And guys, this is where it's very important, unless otherwise agreed in writing. Sellers shall complete all required repairs and treatments prior to closing, and all permits must be obtained, and repairs and treatments must be performed by persons who are licensed to provide such repairs or treatments, if no license is required by law, or commercially engaged in the trade of providing such repairs or treatments. You cannot just hire some random guy off the street and say, hey, can you fix this stuff for me? You can't do it yourself. It has to be done by a professional for the reason that we just talked about. You putting gum around a wire isn't fixing the problem. It may fix it for a week and get closed, but it's not fixing the problem. So it has to be done by a professional. If the permits are required, the permits have to be pulled, or you can have some serious issues because the contract has already said such.
The other thing too there is, as a buyer's agent, make sure you understand who is required to have a license and who is not required to have a license.
True.
There's nothing that looks worse than you send me over a repair amendment and tell me to have these, this carpentry work done by a licensed carpenter.
Well, that doesn't exist.
Exactly. And so that makes you, that just puts me at another advantage over the top of you as a selling agent, as a buyer's agent, that you don't really understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so make sure you know. And if you don't know, just pick the phone up, call your broker. They know. They're going to tell you. Don't put licensed carpenter in there. Plumber,
no.
Yeah. Carpenter, no.
Carpenter may not be licensed, but they better be insured and bonded, though.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a good point. But you got to be. All these things have to be specific. And
absolutely.
Statements, make all the difference in the world when you're dealing with a seasoned selling agent versus sometimes a relatively new buyer agent.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Okay. Continuing on. At buyer's election, any transferable warranties received by seller with respect to repairs and treatments will be transferred to buyer at buyer's expense. Seller fails to complete any agreed repairs and treatments prior to closing date. Buyer may exercise remedies under paragraph 15 or extend your contract up to 5 days if necessary for seller to complete the required and treatment. So you can extend it or you can terminate as far as paragraph 15 is concerned. We'll do that later. Environmental matters. Buyers advise that the presence of wetlands, toxic substances, including asbestos and waste of other environmental hazards, or presence of threatened or endangered species or its habitat may affect buyers' intended use of the property. If buyers are concerned about these matters, an addendum promulgated by TREC or required by the party should be used. Understanding what asbestos looks like. Asbestos, El Paso, we have a ton of asbestos tile, plus we have a ton of asbestos roof tiles. So if you don't know what those look like and you're going in a home and the home is covered in asbestos, you don't know it, that's something that may be a problem later. I don't know about if you guys have that in Dallas a lot.
No, but there is a real quick story I'll tell on that. So there is, one of our favorite guys out of Waco, Texas, Chip Gaines, who got wrote up in the TREC report because they were disposing of asbestos improperly on his television show. And got fined $200,000. Yeah, because the sad thing was they had video of it because he was doing it live on the television show, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, it happens and it's a big deal, and so especially if you're working in houses that were built, in the 50s or 60s, I mean, make sure that you understand this process because it can come back to bite you and it can bite you hard.
Absolutely. Residential service contracts. This is where we're going to end today, guys, making sure you guys understand those. Buyer may purchase a residential service contract from a residential service company licensed by the Texas Real Estate Commission. If buyer purchases a residential service contract, seller shall reimburse buyer at closing for the cost of the residential service contract and amount not to exceed blank. That is negotiable. Buyer shall review any residential service contract for the scope of coverage exclusions and limitations, and bolded. The purchase of a residential service contract is optional. Similar coverage may be purchased from various companies authorized to do business in Texas. Guys, there's a ton of home warranty companies out there. They all offer a little bit different service. So get a bunch of different flyers, give them to your client, say, let me know which one you want to use.
Yeah. Minimum of three.
Absolutely. There's El Paso, I think we have 7 or 8. I mean, we have quite a few. Dallas, I can't even imagine how many you guys have.
100, maybe. They're everywhere. They're everywhere you look.
But they're definitely useful. I've gotten. I continue to have a home warranty on my home every year, and it's extremely valuable. I end up usually making money every year on the bad boy. So.
Yeah, and the other side of it too, from the seller standpoint, if I'm representing a seller, I always recommend my seller at least buy the minimum home warranty from a disclosure standpoint. I mean, you and I know we could walk out the door today, come back in 2 hours, and air conditioner doesn't work.
Absolutely.
Well, that's the exact same thing that happens to you when you close on the house. You leave that day, and when everybody comes back that afternoon, air conditioner, and I promise you, the buyer will swear up and down you knew it wasn't working.
Oh yeah, we had that problem. We actually had a deal where, everything was going good. And this one just closed recently. It was one of those kind of horror stories where, the new buyer wanted the keys. We're like, you don't get the keys till we close. We close. They get the keys at about 10 a.m. They run over to start demolishing the portions of the upstairs, and then they call us 5 hours later, like, hey, there's a leak. We want you to, you're responsible for it. So you've been demolishing the house for 5 hours. You're going to tell me there's a water leak that we don't know about? I'm not playing.
Yeah.
So there's huge issues that can come up and continuously come up. But one of those things where if the leak had just magically happened, that day, there's no telling. And I'm not saying they did anything wrong. I'm not saying that they hit it. It very well could have been a leak, but I know we didn't do anything at the house, and they'd had possession for 5 hours. It was just one of those things where it happens, and it can happen quickly.
Yeah, and water's one of those things that it can't hide itself very long.
No, guys. So we're going to remember now that we're actually starting with paragraph 8, which was paragraph 4 and 8 combined in the old contract. So now we'll get to play with that next week. I'm
actually making a note.
Please do, because I sleep since then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. Landry, that was interesting. I love that. I love that stuff. That's good. That's understanding these things is the difference in being a professional and just being some agent running around out there, that people just, there's nothing that I hate worse than when one of my agents would call me and cringe because they're like, oh man, you don't know this guy I'm dealing with. He doesn't know anything, And you know, that makes it difficult. And it absolutely does not do your fiduciary responsibility to your client, you know.
What I love is when an agent will come up to me and say, "Hey, remember when you talked about this last week? I had that come up and I knew what to do."
Yeah.
And that just makes you feel good as that you're actually doing something you're supposed to be doing, and it makes them feel good going, "Hey, I know what I'm doing on this."
Well, you know, here's the one thing I can tell you is that if you want to be, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more as we go down the road here today, but you know, one of the most important things that you can have as a agent and represent anybody is confidence, right? And the only way you can be confident is that you understand this, because nothing else really matters. You know, we can talk about stuff all day long and how to generate leads and do all that, but when it comes down to it, this is what we're negotiating on 100% of the time, right? And so make sure that 99, you'll get some builder contracts, but if you're doing a resale, this is it. So make sure you take it home. Make sure you read it, guys. Take notes on it. You know, if you don't understand something, we went over a little bitty piece here that I know people don't, but this question was actually asked to me one time is, why is there wetlands in the contract? You know, we're in Ellis County. We don't have wetland. You know, El Paso has many wetlands. And so, but it's in there, and you'll get those personality types that read every single word. And you need that at least understand enough of the contract to be able to come back and explain to them why it's there. Right. You know, and that's a big deal. So today, guys, our topic today for fundamentals is that we need to learn to practice more than we play. All right. And what happens to us as any kind of sales professional is we get out there and we think we know things. So we quit going through the pieces that make us good, right? The presentation piece that makes us good, right? I don't care if you're presenting to your mother, right? You go in and you dress properly and you give them the full presentation every single time. Why? Because you got to remember, everything you do is going to create, if you do this properly, each time you present something to somebody, it'll create you anywhere from 3 to 5 referrals, right? And why? Because if I go in and, me and Andrew known each other our whole life, we're buddies. I show up over there in my shorts and flip flops with a 1-page CMA and a business card, right? He's not impressed. Yeah, he'll probably do the deal with me. But when his buddy says, "Oh yeah, it's my buddy Ken," he just, I just let him do it because he's my friend. No. I want Andrew jumping up, down, turning backflips, going, "You won't believe this guy came over, full presentation, went through the whole thing." Even though I was telling him from the very beginning, Kent, you don't need to do that, and we've all heard that, right? I'm still going to do it. I'm at least going to have it with me, right? Now, if he's ready to sign, I'm going to let him sign. Let's not misunderstand that. Okay. but I'm still going to have it all with me because I want him to have the opportunity, to be able to go out and tell his friend when he goes to work tomorrow and they're standing at the water cooler, getting him a drink or getting him a cup of coffee. And somebody says, "What'd you do last night?" And he says, "Oh, I met with my realtor friend, Kent, and man, you should have seen the presentation he gave me. And I've known this guy my whole life." Right. That's a referral waiting to happen. All right. And so we got to make sure we do that. All right. So I want you to think about anybody out there. I want you to think about, professional football players. I want you to think about professional musicians, professional dancers. They all practice more than they play, right? They all do 4 or 5 days of practice, 1 day of play, right? And that's the reality of it, right? But what we do is we get in there and think we can just play all the time. And that's just not true. If you don't have a 100% fully built presentation that you can do without looking at it, then you don't understand. I'll never forget. I was in the corporate events business for years and years and years, and we had a booth at the Texas State Fair that we took care of for Kroger, which is in our part of the world that's a big food chain, right? And so we took care of this for him. And for 10 years, I was right next to this guy in the automotive building that sold the ShamWow, that thing that you clean your car with, right? Yeah. And man, I can tell you, this guy had his pitch down so well. It was exactly the same, 8 hours a day. 7 days a week. He could stand up there and he'd go through that little 5-minute pitch that he had selling those, and it was the exact same thing every single time. And I never in 10 years saw him do that pitch that somebody didn't walk away buying something. Okay, so what does that mean? So I asked him one day. His name was Fred. I'll never forget him. A little short, bald-headed guy. He was funny as he could be, but he was really great at what he did, right? I said, Fred, I said, man, you have got that down. He said, Kent, I've recorded it. He said, when I leave Dallas and head to Louisiana for the Louisiana State Fair, which is about a 10-hour drive for him, he said, the entire 10 hours, I listened to the recordings of myself. And I listened to what I was saying and how I said it. And then I think about the results I got from that. All right. So I want you to think about that, guys. He's selling a $20 product, and he took that much time every day, day in, day out to understand his presentation. Right. And we show up and think we can walk into somebody's home, the most valuable asset they own, and wing it. All right. I got a big problem. I'm just going to tell you, you show up at my house and try to wing it and try to sell my most valuable asset, ain't going to happen. I don't care if I've known you. I don't care if you're related to me. Okay. It's not going to happen because it's my most valuable asset. Right. So I need you guys to understand that you need to do that. So if you have not gone out and spent the time, and most of you can get it, all this stuff's already built. So you don't have to spend tons of time building it. You just adjust it to yourself. But, if you don't have a buyer's representation or buyer's presentation, excuse me, if you don't have a buyer's presentation, and that's where most people drop the ball, is they never meet with buyers and do a presentation, which is, in my opinion, the biggest mistake most real estate agents ever make, right? Because two things I need to know. One, I need them to know that I'm the professional and I'm in charge, right? It gives me the opportunity to lay out the rules on how this happens. Most of you guys never lay out the rules on how this happens, right? But because I practice it enough and I have the dialogues in place, it's real simple. I say, hey, Andrew, man, it's really nice to meet you. I need to let you kind of know how I work. I work Monday through Friday, 9 to 6. I work Saturday, 10 to 2, and I don't work on Sundays. Is that going to be okay with you? All right? So when I lay that out, guess who they don't call on Sunday during the middle of the Cowboy game? And I know you don't watch the Cowboys, but the rest of us do. But because I've already made it clear to them that, I work Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, 10 to 2 on Saturday, and I don't work on Sunday. And they've already said, oh, no, that's fine, Kent. That's great. Now, and so I've established that. But that dialogue, I didn't just think that up 2 minutes ago before when I said, I didn't wing that, right? I practiced that dialogue a million times. So when I say it, everybody's confident in it and they go, oh yeah, great. That's fine. Right. But you got to practice those things. If you don't, they're not going to come out right. Now, I'm not a big script guy. Don't misunderstand. I like to find scripts, and I'll send some out to Andrew for you guys to get you through some of these presentations. But I like to take a script and then figure out how to make that script my own. And then once I have that script my own, then it becomes natural to me. It just rolls off the tongue, right? If I'm going to ask Andrew if he has an agent to work with, I mean, it's a dialogue that I practice and practice and practice. I say, hey, Andrew, this can't, I need to know if you were going to look to buy or sell a home, or you had a friend or family member that was going to buy or sell a home, you have an agent that you work with, Okay, so I want to know. I don't care what he says. I just want to ask the question, right? So now I've asked the question, and he's either going to say yes or no. But I can't ask that question if I haven't practiced it, right? It's just not going to roll off your tongue properly, right? And so you have to learn to practice more than you play. When you're riding in the car, you got a couple choices. You can listen to talk radio and hear all the crappy things that are going on in the world that may or may not be true, right? I will tell you, I listen to a lot of music when I'm in the car. About half the time music, the other half of the time I'm working dialogues. When I'm driving down the road and I don't have anything else to do, I'm letting that's going through my head. And one of my best agents told me one time, she said, every time I drive from the office to my listing, I do the entire presentation 2 to 3 times in my head before I walk in the door. Okay. That's what professionals do. The rest of us just kind of wing it. Right. And I'm telling you guys, right now it might be kind of simple because the market's so good. goofy and the things that are going on with it now. I get that. It's not always going to be this way. And the people that practice their trade properly and go in and learn their trade properly are going to be the ones that win, right? And I'm going to tell you, it's not always, you need to understand how to pull data. You may make the best report in the entire world. If you can't present that report to me, I don't care how good it is, right? Right? It's a combination of all of it. It's not one simple thing. So guys, what I want you to think about is this: is number one, I want you to build a buyer's presentation. Number two, I want you to build a listing presentation. If you don't have a buyer's presentation, you don't have a listing presentation, that's your homework. That's where you got to start. It doesn't have to be big, crazy. And like I tell you, I used to do mine, and when I would do them on a regular basis, I had a piece put together that had the information about how wonderful Ken is, right? We all got to put that in there because you don't want to say it, you want them to read it, right? And so we put that in there. But then every time I do it, I'd pull and I guess they have it out there, Andrew, an RPR report, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'd pull the entire RPR report, and it's like, I'd have a 3-ring binder that had almost 200 pages of data in it, right? On every house. I didn't care with my mother. Every house got that in. And I had that when I walked in the room. Now, you and I both know we're not going over 200 pages of data, right? But when the guy that came in before me had a 1-page CMA and a business card, and I show up with 200 pages of data, what do you think the attitude of the seller is?
Well, it changes.
Yeah, completely. I've done my homework. The other guy just pushed the button, right? You might as well just send him over a Zillow app and get a crappy number, right? So, we have to be the professional. And the way we're the professional is that we practice. We practice, and we practice. Okay. If you have a dog, your dog should know your presentation better than anybody in the world because you've given it to him so many times. That's just, I know that sounds crazy, but guys, that's how we win. When I walked in to do a listing, and I can tell you that, I love the show Jerry Maguire. I don't know if y'all maybe too, y'all not too young for that. Y'all saw that. Right? But one of the statements he says is that you don't understand. I'm good in the living room. All right. And that stuck in my head, as a real estate agent, if I'm going to pick up a listing, boy, I better be good in the living room, and that's where all this comes. But if I didn't practice, I'm not going to be good. Right. So the number one thing is build your buyer's presentation, build your listing presentation. Okay. Get those things put together and then practice them over and over 2 or 3 times a day. It's, you're talking about take 30 minutes, time block your day. We all need to time block our day to have time to lead generate and time to practice. Okay. Block that time out and spend that 30 minutes. I don't care if you lock yourself in a closet, spend that 30 minutes presenting that presentation, the buyer and the listing, to at least a couple times, right? After a couple of weeks, you're going to get where it's pretty smooth. After a certain period of time, it's going to be just natural, right? One of the things when I was about 24 years old, I took the Dale Carnegie course, which, was kind of the original sales training course, right? And my mentor handed me a book. And I'll send you guys a copy of what that is so Andrew can send it out to everybody. But that book was called Skill with People, and it was written by a guy named Les Giblin. Okay. And, I've got it on my phone. I've got it everywhere you can find it. So I read it all the time. He said, Kent, if you'll read this book once a month, every month for the rest of your life, you'll never have a problem dealing with people. Right. And, I was 24, I was like everybody else who was 24. I really didn't listen to very many people about very many things, but luckily I listened to him about that. Right. And so I'm 58 now. So do the math, right? I've read that book once a month, every month since I was 24 years old. All right. All right. Now, I can tell you, when I first started, it's about 80 something pages. And when I first started, it'd take me a day or two to get through it, right? Because I do have a little ADD. I can't stay focused very long. But, but now, I can read the thing in like 10 minutes because I know every word of it because I've done it so many times, so repetitively, over and over and over. So when my daughter, she graduated college, and Andrew knows Haley. You met Haley, right?
I know.
Yeah. So Haley's a pretty headstrong young lady, right? You know, the super real estate agent. Love everything about her. But yeah, but when she graduated college, I walked up and I handed her that book, and I said, "Sweetheart, if you'll read this book once a month, every month for the rest of your life, you'll never have a problem dealing with people." And she's like, takes it, rolls her eyes, like, "Oh, great," you know, and off she goes. Right. Well, about 2 weeks later, she comes walking into my office, and she's got that book in her hand, and she looks at me and she says, "You've been doing this to me my whole life, haven't you?" I'm like, "Yes, I have." You know, but it's because it works, guys. You know, and so, but if I read it one time and set it aside and never looked at it again, then I wouldn't have the skill sets that I needed to move forward with these presentations and the things I do. Right. So again, it goes back to the moral of today's talk: is you got to practice more than you play. If you don't practice more than you play, you're never going to be better, right? I mean, most of you don't know this. I've been in the martial arts for most of my life, right? I mean, for years and years and years, right? And you know, that's the one thing I can promise you about that is I spent, not only myself but most practitioners spend thousands and thousands and thousands of hours practicing, most of them by themselves, right? You know, for the outside occasion that they may sometime ever have to use that, right? Yeah, to this day, I mean, minor little incidents, but never really any life-threatening situation where I ever had to do that. But I started that when I was 13 years old, right? Yeah, and I've practiced almost every day since I was 13 years old. All right, so what does that mean, right? It just means that I'm ready, right? And that's what I want you guys to be, is when you walk into that, do that listing presentation or get that buyer to go out there and work with you, I want you to be ready. I mean, here's what I can tell you. If you walk into me and say, "Kent, I couldn't get them to sign the buyer's representation agreement," I know one thing: you ain't practiced enough. You know, if you practice like I practice, they're going to sign it. They're going to be so scared not to sign it, you know, that because of your presentation, they're going to go, "Oh crap, I got to sign it. I got to have Ken in my corner," you know, right? And so that's the moral of the day. Let's get those out next week. I'm making another note so we don't forget here, Andrew. Is I'm going to talk to you guys about how to use the presentation and how to do a buyer and a seller's needs determination. So once you understand what they need, now if you set the precedence and say, "Here's how I work," you know, I work Monday through Friday 9 to 6, you know, Saturday 10 to 2, and I don't work on Sunday. We set a precedent, right? Then if I go in and do a needs determination, and Andrew tells me, "Kent, you know, the only thing that's really a deal breaker for me, if there's those big high power lines in that development, I'm not moving in." Okay. And then he sends me 14 things off Zillow that all have big power lines in the backyard. You know, I now have the ability to pick the phone up and say, "Well, Andrew, you know, you told me that you weren't going to live somewhere that had the power lines. So what's changed?" Well, nothing's changed. He just didn't pay attention. He just running on Zillow, picking up stuff, seeing if we can run around and waste our time, right? Because they're not going to buy it. So we'll work on that needs determination next week. It's a great thing. It changes. It takes you from showing 20 houses down to 2 or 3 if you do it right. So we'll work on that. That's another fundamental practice that we all need to be really, really, really good at. Work on your time management, guys. I know we talked a little bit of that early on. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we move forward. But you got to break those times down. You got to know when to generate leads. You got to know when to practice, right? You got to put together that white time so that you have time to go show and do listings. But you got to break that stuff down. So, Andrew, I was talking really fast today.
That was good, though. I mean, we got what we needed. I think we did do a repeat, but paragraph 7 needs a repeat. And what you said is absolutely true. I mean, you can't fake it till you make it in this business. I mean, you can drive a flashy car, you can wear a flashy suit, but at the end of the day, you gotta prove yourself every day.
Absolutely. So, all right, my friend, that was fun. I enjoyed that very much. I can't
appreciate it.
And see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you much.